Lewis, welcome to the Robert Scott Bell Show, my friend.
Nice to be here, Robert. Thank you very much.
I'm honored to have you on. And like I said, we've learned about your website and all about you. I'm like, dude, this guy, where's he been? And how did we not know?
I don't even know about me.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that. I don't know
Yeah.
about me sometimes either.
Love your shirt, by the way.
Oh, appreciate that very much. And, it's not intended to offend, but I can't help it. You don't have a right not to be offended. And I know that's not what you're concerned about, but there are people out there that go, oh man, I can't believe he said that or he did that. But that's what freedom of speech is all about, protecting the speech you don't like.
That's right. Exactly right. And I thoroughly believe that. I think it's interesting, some of the things you were touching on, because I believe there's really not a red or blue anymore. There's pretty much a uniparty.
Yeah.
And their one goal is just globalism. And they hide, some hide better than others. But the reality is it's tough. I study a lot about RFK Jr. before, and I like the direction he's going now. I was very concerned with his original global climate change agenda, because he was on board with the
All of that. Yeah.
all of it. And it's interesting, aside from Robert, people need to understand, when they talk about religions, climate change is a religion. And most people don't address it like that, but it really is. That's an absolute religion. So is this the way people treat
is to create more diseases on which it profits through the management of it.
Yeah.
Derided as outcast. They've been outcast. They've been demonetized, banned, etc. So that entire system, which has been a blind spot for many freedom-loving people, is something I had to discover early on in my young years, being sick from modern medicine and finding natural medicine. And rather than being unscientific or anti-science, it's been the thing that's allowed me now in my 50s to outpace the kid that I was in my 20s that was sick chronically from all the drugs I was on, approved by the FDA.
Yeah. I was lucky enough about a little over 30 years ago, actually, about 35 years ago. And I say lucky enough to get in a serious car accident, because I ended up with a chiropractor, and the chiropractor quickly, within a minute, taught me why I should run from big pharma. And he said, Lewis, let me explain it this way. He says, virtually every issue that we have, there's some form of cure on earth naturally somewhere. He goes, the reason why big pharma won't give you that natural cure is because they can't monetize it without it being patented. Well, you can't patent it without there being a synthetic string. He goes, here's the challenge. If you recreate anything in a synthetic form, your body reads it as a poison. So therefore you put it in your body, you're being poisoned every time. He says, and that's the crux of big pharma right there. They know it. They've known it for 50, 60 years. They've known it since Rockefeller really got involved, that they're giving us poisons, but the only way they can patent it is if they create a synthetic string. So they literally find something that works in nature and reproduce it synthetically for their own pocketbooks, not to heal you or me. Again, of course, we're always working on the symptoms, aren't we, instead of what the cause is.
And man, like Ron Paul, and Ron Paul has endorsed him already, is not for purchase. He's not for sale. So there are good things happening because of the bad things that have happened too.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right.
Muted for a second. Yeah, it's interesting too, because there is always good where there's bad. Well, there again, people tell me I wear rose-colored glasses all the time because I try to find the positive, right? And I try to find, as a friend of mine, the diamonds within the dog crap, for better words. But the illusion in our political system is huge. And I like to tell people this because I'm a huge patriot, but at the same time, I will tell everybody that America that we know of is the largest psyop, because it is positioned as the beacon of the hill. It's positioned as this perfect form of government that people want to strive and run over here from every single country. But yet, inside that government apparatus, we have actors. They're not really, they're playing a part. They're not for we the people whatsoever. So all the work we do is we try to teach people that you work on the micro, and the micro fixes the macro. So you have to go within your school districts, within your city councils, locally,
Mhm.
all that work. If we always focus nationally, it's not going to, it
Right.
won't, it will not get the job done. We have to focus locally, and then locally will,
No.
you have to fix it one county slash one city at a time. And that's the type of things that we work on. But yeah, here's what's interesting, and I love this. I believe that across the board, most sane people are a lot closer in their thought process than not.
Mhm.
So, if great example, what I would have looked at as a hippie in the 70s, right? They have some very great things that they would talk about. Let's grow our own food.
Mhm.
Let's produce our own medicine, right? Let's help out our neighbors, right? Let's ground ourselves. Let's be with earth. Let's breathe in the air.
Mhm.
Let's hike and do all these wonderful. And it's like, is how far is that from where we really want to be and where we're figuring out, right? So what I would like to do is I believe people should find the messages that they can connect on instead of find the divisions. It's really easy to find the divisions,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
I
But why not find where we can connect?
we've had some great examples of that, and I bring up Ron Paul all the time.
Mhm.
You know, he showed us that even, you could find common ground with someone who's a socialist on many areas and find one area, whether it be monetary policy or other, to work with them on that, because obviously he doesn't agree on many other things. And we need more examples like that. When I bring somebody on that I mostly agree with, but there's a point of disagreement, it's not that I'll avoid that. In fact, I could bring it up, but the perspective is that to see people engage in debate, discussion, even argument, and still be pals, we've lost that. They'd like us to believe that it's not possible. In fact, the opposite should happen. You should cancel. Many of us on our side of the equation, we're not about forcing people to live the way we live. We just didn't want the government or them to be able to force the government to live the way they wanted us to live. And yet they were convinced that we needed to be canceled, suppressed, censored, outcast, et cetera, or even forced. And there's so many examples of whether they be celebrities or otherwise. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger at one point, remember, said, "Screw your freedom." And
Yep,
he's
that's
since
good.
apologized. I don't know if he's sincere about it, but it shows how much the desire to be part of the herd, the group, is something that drives men insane. And that's group dynamics. And then we regain our semblance of sanity slowly and one at a time, not as a group.
Well, it's interesting because communism, which starts usually at socialism, and then Marxist moves up the ladder to communism. It's very interesting you bring this up because ultimately what it is collectivism is
Mhm.
what it is. Now, that utopian thought process is actually beautiful. So I don't think we can throw away that the collective is so amazing and so important and so on and so forth. What people miss, and I think this is the key, is when we have the collectivism attitude, what happens is we're always putting the collective before the individual. Well, that's not the way our republic was founded. Our republic is founded that the individual needs to be supported and acknowledged as equal to the collective. And when the individual can build up and work on themselves, be the best they can, they're a lot more benefit to the collective than if they jumped into the collective alone. And
Mhm.
people have trouble separating that. And so they matriculate towards these socialist values, and they don't understand it's actually that's a short-term solution for a long-term fix. And the long-term fix is if we all are strong individually, inherently through God, we naturally want to help others.
Mhm.
That's just the way it happens. And the collective is a lot stronger if the individual is strong.
Yeah, exactly. There's a movie that just came out by my friend Mickey Willis, G. Edward Griffin, as he opens and talks from the 1960s about the threats that we had. And it boils down to the word you said, the C word, collectivism. Collectivism.
I learned
And
it from G. Edward Griffin, actually.
Yeah, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful, movie, although some people on the left are losing their minds about it because, they don't want to acknowledge that collectivism is that great evil, and they won't discern that concept of a utopian ideology in terms of excuse me, collective communism, Marxism, and the reality of how it manifests on the planet every time when they continue to say, "Well, it just hasn't been done right yet." And no, the denial of the individual is the destruction of the entirety of society because God creates us as individuals, not as collective mush. You
Mhm.
know, we each have an individual role and goal to play, and we see our through our own eyes, we experience life, and that's the way by God it's designed. And to deny that by a man's arrogance to think I can play God and make everybody equal in the sense that we read about, it's not how it works, and it never will work that way. But as you said, the appeal of it, especially to a lot of young people, is like, well, it'd be great if we're all equal. It's like, well, we are on a spiritual level, but our belief systems are different. They manifest differently in our lives. And that's the design for this planet. And that's not me encouraging.
But how boring would it be if we all thought the same?
Mhm.
I wouldn't wanna be here, to be honest. It's just that wouldn't be a place for me. I love having open debate. I think it's very healthy, and I'm not gonna learn if I agree with everybody. I want to learn. I want to expand. I want to be better. I wanna be challenged. So it's it's maddening that we would even think that way. But I think we always have to go back, and you mentioned this, and I say this often. This is a 1,000-year deal.
Yeah.
Right. This has been the manipulation of our mind, and the propaganda that we've been fed has been going on for a long, long time. I mean, I could pinpoint on how it went through the Khazarian mafia in Ukraine and a lot of things back in the day, the Ukraine area, I should say, and then infiltrated through the Rothschilds to the central banking system. We could go historically through it, but the reality is for over 1,000 years, there's been people that want to control us, and they're very, very smart.
They're good at what they do.
They
they,
are
they
they are
know how to push
and
our
they have a
button.
long-term game plan
Mhm.
where we have a short-term game plan.
Yeah. I
And
mean, we're just trying to survive to pay the cost of government for most people,
that's
right?
right. That's why they win all the time. They're thinking 100-year strategy, and we're thinking next week.
Mhm, exactly. The website, we have it linked up today at robertscottbell.com to by your bloodline because you didn't wear a mask, you didn't get the jab, you believed in freedom, you believed in going to worship just as you did beforehand, and you didn't want to stop doing it. And now suddenly you were a pariah to your friends and family. And this,
Which I find ironic. I don't know if you can see it, but that
yeah,
guy's Martin Luther King, which is one of my favorite people that's ever been on the planet, and I've
mm,
studied so much about him, and they knew that. But the brainwashing is so tight and so hard from the cabal that
yeah.
immediately
It's amazing that your own kids, knowing better, have been programmed so completely.
that's what's amazing, isn't
This
it?
is
Oh, by the way, my wife is Mexican,
mm,
and she's called racist. So it's the programming is so deep and so dark. Now, that being said, again, I like to look for the positive.
sure.
I believe we're going in the right direction. I'm seeing it constantly. So a lot of people with this whole the trans agenda that's going on now, this said people need to understand this has nothing to do with trans people. It has everything to do with the color revolution and how to take over the
Mm,
population, right? So, but people are starting to see it. I mean, look at what's happening to Bud Light and Target, and now it looks like it may be happening to Chick-fil-A of all places, right? Where these businesses are being held accountable. They're like, okay, you want to play the game, who I've exposed as controlled opposition, and that's Sean Hannity. And people are in love with Sean Hannity and the Republicans, and so I go, first, you got to get away from the red and the blue, or we're never going to move forward
right.
anywhere, in my opinion. But they love him. But if you listen to what he says, first he wears a CIA a little
Yeah.
badge
Yeah.
on his outfit. That should be a clue there. But in regards to his speak, anytime Republicans want to stand up, he says, do not boycott. He says, do not protest, right? Do not do anything except maybe write letters. Why does he say that? He says because it is disrespectful as a conservative. Okay, that's controlled opposition, just the way Fox News is controlled opposition. They drive you in a certain direction, and then they want to twist you and get you not to do what's most important. Well, I'm telling you, boycott's working, and they're working big time exposing these companies. Now, I know there's a whole network of people that says, well, this is what the WEF wanted. It goes through BlackRock, so on and so forth. Because as soon as those people leave the Fortune 500 companies, they go build their own business, a small business, or they work for another small business, which helps the infrastructure and the foundation of America, doesn't hurt it. So I don't believe that's what happened. I believe we, the people, are now saying we've had enough.
Lewis, talk to me in my audience about these two words, controlled opposition, for instance, because I think it's overused and abused, and
It
everybody
is.
knows, right?
No, it
So
is.
how to differentiate? Because I think you've got critical thinking skills. I know you do, from observing you for the moments we've been together already, and your website. How to differentiate between that? Because someone like Hannity, who wears the CIA pin, could be more closely aligned with the mission and purpose of a deeper, darker state, yet have maybe some essence of a genuine conservatism in his history, knowing it. He started years ago, like in Huntsville, Alabama, in talk radio. I grew up with him in Atlanta. He was a bit annoying to me, Hannity, even though I might have more conservative leanings. I tended to enjoy more the libertarian perspective. Neil Bortz was the guy I grew up with in
I
Atlanta.
prefer libertarian myself. Yes.
And yet to say that about so many, it becomes almost meaningless to make accusations of controlled ops. So how do you differentiate? How can you help people to see?
Oh, I think it's an excellent question. Yeah, and I've studied this deeply, and I actually teach this. So first thing we need to know is what's the objective of controlled opposition. We need to look at it as if it's marketing, and that's all it is, market share. So what controlled opposition wants to do is they need to grab as much market share as they can, because they're pulling you away from somebody else or some other entity that can give you the message that you really need to hear. So the goal is, let's use Fox News as an example. The goal is to pull as much market share. They did a great job. So they got virtually all the conservative thought thinkers, the people that want to be conservative, in the corner of where they need them. And so what controlled op will do, they'll give you 80 to 90% good information. So I tell people, watch controlled op all the time, but just be careful to grab what you need to grab and what you don't. So the idea is when they grab that market share, they're not only pulling you from where you can get the real information that you really want to know, they're sheltering you from some of that stuff. Then they can use you as a tool when they need to. And what that is they'll drive you in a certain direction because they already have your ear. That's what controlled op is. And I would say you see it a lot. You're going to even see it in the Patriot movement. They're not born and raised controlled op. They weren't targeted. A lot of times they'll create a platform and a following, and then they'll be approached, I believe. It could just be from a financial standpoint. Here's the way we need our message to go in this direction. They may not even know they're controlled op half the time. But the markers I look for is, do they tell you 80 to 90% of the truth? And then do they have like this weird little take where they try to push you in a certain direction all of a sudden, right? And do they grow fast and get a lot of market share? Those are usually some key markers to do it. Because I use controlled opposition a lot, the word, but I only use it on maybe 8 to 10 total people or entities worldwide.
Well, and to your point about a nuanced understanding of a controlled opposition, most people don't. They're not aware that they're part of a controlled opposition, and it may only be a fleeting area of their life. It's just like that they fall in line with that message because maybe they worship, if you will, not literally but figuratively, someone like a Sean Hannity as a public figure that they idolize, for instance. And then you have an interesting thing that just happened, of course, with Tucker Carlson, which is that or not chemo. It was amazing. So even in the midst of Fox News being clearly controlled op in so many ways, there are good messages that are delivered within that framework.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. Same with patriots that may be online that I would consider controlled opposition. There's a lot, especially for people that don't have the information. One of the best places for you to go, and this may sound weird, for if you're new to this information is to somebody that's controlled opposition, because they hammer out so many different subjects
Hmm.
that are very attractive. The key is be able to have some form of discernment.
Yes.
And and if something just doesn't click right, like it never clicked right with me every time Hannah would say, "Don't boycott." I say, "Why on earth wouldn't you do that? You know what? Why would that make you a bad person? You see somebody doing something screwy, you say, no, I'm not going to give them my money."
Hmm.
That's a no-brainer to me. That's when I started studying Hannity and his background and so on and so forth, and that I came to my conclusion in regards to him. But look at uh people that may not be controlled opposition still go onto a show,
Sure.
right? And I understand that because it's good exposure at the same time.
Yeah. So, folks, it isn't about not, how we say, paying attention or observing those that we feel are compromised, because there's always going to be elements of really good information. In fact, that's the entire what they call plausibility of the entirety. If you throw out complete nonsense, gibberish, and things that are obviously not true, no one would pay attention. So the idea is throw out even 90% or more of good stuff, so that that one area that you need to have them, you've got them already, and then you direct them. That's again a critical eye to that concept of controlled opposition that I appreciate, Lewis, that you're sharing. And I hesitate, but I don't. Super Don, my humble and lovable producer, we've had this discussion for a long time because the word is thrown out to become meaningless, and that's why I'm greatly appreciative of your willingness to talk about this. That there are a lot of things that are intellectually lazy when we throw out words like that, as opposed to what can we do to better ourselves, benefit the movement. If we say there is a movement back toward freedom, back toward limited government, which I believe there is, because the essence and DNA of America is that, even though we seem to have abandoned it. And certainly, if you only pay attention to what we call mainstream or legacy media sources, will you ever find that freedom is winning? And that tyranny and that collectivism isn't, for instance. And through this, I like to think of the positivity. So, Super Don, if you don't mind, open up your microphone and camera there, and engage, if you will, in anything that you heard about that controlled op discussion. Because again, I recognize, and I don't like it just being thrown out there without thinking critically about it.
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to it's a tactic that is used by both sides. If it would be the same thing as like somebody saying, "Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer." What have you just done? You've just dismissed that person. They no longer are credible. So it's really easy for people to go, "Oh, you're controlled opposition." No, you're controlled opposition. Oh no, now we're both controlled opposition. Oh,
Exactly
what
the
do we do now?
playground.
Right?
Yeah.
I've seen it so many times. So
Yep.
yeah, but I appreciate, Lewis, your opinion, and Robert, I'm kind of shocked because,
Yeah.
how many times have I brought up a CNN article
Yes.
and your hair falls out and you run out of the room and start like, "Oh my god, CNN, yeah, I can't believe you," but because it is. It's, there's good information that come from most outlets, uh, controlled opposition or not.
Yeah.
But it's like what Lewis was saying, it's about having the discernment. And how many times have I ranted about this, right, on this
Exactly.
show?
That's why I
It's
wanted you
like,
to open
"Come
up
on,
the mic.
guys,
Yeah.
take 5 minutes, read it,
Yeah.
look at it." It's not that hard to tell whether something is bogus or not. Look for the warning signs, the red flags. Take a little more time reading about it if you have to. That's part of the journey,
Yeah.
That's part of the learning process. Don't just read the headlines and they go, "Oh, okay, I agree," because that's just something. That's about the laziest thing you can do, or share it. Not even Anyway, I won't start on my rant, but
No, you did good, Super D. I appreciate that. Now that's the insight I wanted to share as well. And Lewis, with your website, which is the best URL I've heard in a long time,
that's
screwbiggov.com.
great. Yeah.
How you even got that's amazing. Uh, your website, tell us a little bit about, for the Robert Scott Bell Show audience that may not know of you. Maybe many of them did. I don't know, but what they can plug into, what they can learn, how they can support you, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, we do a lot of things. One thing that and there's something called the American cartel that really is running everything. They think
Wow.
it's they think it's the Mexican cartels. It's not. It's the American cartel. But we dive deep into that. So that's one of the projects we're working on. We have I'm going to release an app pretty soon, and it's all free. Virtually everything I do is free. It's an app, and it's a Patriot app. I cannot say the name now because
Okay.
they're going to attack it right away. But what this app will do is Patriots worldwide can geo-target now, and they can find other patriots within their area that they can connect with from a social media standpoint. You say, I want to go 5 miles from my house, whatever it is, right? You'll be able to connect with people. If there's an event going on, everybody can show up to the event. Or let's say that in our middle school, they have pornography. Okay. The problem that we've had, and this is what we teach on the Truth Tour, which I'll go into in a minute, but the problem that we've had is we go into these school board meetings with not a very good script. We go in because we're frustrated, we're upset, and we rant and so on and so forth. If the people on the school board are not good people, that's what they want. They want you just to rant, to be all over the place, and they're not really interested in fixing anything. So what we try to teach is that you go in with a pinpoint force. And I like to use this analogy often. So if this is 20 pounds and this is a crystal of your on your phone, you put it on there, nothing's going to happen. But if you put 20 pounds on top of the tip of a pen, it's going to break the crystal. So what we have to do is when we go into board of supervisors, school board meetings, whatever, and I believe the micro fixes the macro, excuse me, we have to go in with the consistent single message. So if you have 50 people that go to speak one after other, and it's all on, let's remove porn from our middle school libraries. We don't need that crap in there. And excuse me, if people don't think that it exists, they need to dive into their middle school libraries, and they're gonna see a lot of crazy stuff. That's just an example. If 50 people go in with that same message, virtually every time we're finding that the school boards, they cave. They go, okay, we'll look into it, we'll take care of it, we'll fix it. This same process can work for virtually everything. In Shasta County, California, they went in with a consistent message. They wanted to remove, and now they're having actual meetings, live televised on chemtrails. Not saying there's chemtrails or not, but at least this is what happens when we the people go in with a focused message. And we've seen it. We've seen it all over California, believe it or not. It's California is redder than you can believe. We were just told that it's blue.
Yeah, in the visits I've had, there are enclaves, and they've all been in hiding underground. And if they find a way that can come up, they're like, "We're okay. Yeah, we're alive." It's amazing. But yeah, what you're talking about is strategy, absolutely, and being efficient at the action. It's the kung fu of the response or the proactive movement back toward freedom, rather than spinning our wheels in come back to the controlled op scenario where we have good information and then we do the wrong thing with it that will only lead to the same thing happening again. And Steve makes a funny comment in the chat room. He says, screw biggov.gov would be great too, but that would definitely be controlled opposition if it's
that's right.
That's obvious, right? So, but thank you for that suggestion. So yeah, check out screw big gov, and it's .com, and plug into what we're talking about here, and Lewis is doing, which is amazing. And do you have a good team to work with? Are you a one-man show? How are you putting all this out?
Oh no, dozens and dozens between admins and like our True Tour manager and our whole team on the True Tours that we take with us all over the place, and the Freedom in Action and the website builders and the admins. I mean, you name. We have, I think last count I had over 40 people helping me. I cannot do it by myself. There's no way.
Dude,
I'm kind of the idea man, and then I have people that implement these ideas for me.
That's great. I wish I could be with you at these events. I mean, there's one coming up. It says June 24th in San Diego. I'm going to be at a Freedom event in Loveland, Colorado that same day, or else I'd find an excuse to be there with you guys. But we have a lot of events coming up, and y'all check out the upcoming events tab at robertscottbell.com. In that, if you can't make it to San Diego, come see me in Loveland, Colorado, and various events that are happening same weekend. There's a lot going on, and we can't be everywhere. Also, shout out to our friend G. Edward Griffin, who's hosting the next Red Pill Expo in Des Moines, Iowa, which will be, I believe, in August. Super Don, if you can go to the upcoming events tab, show everybody that Red Pill Expo. And I'll be emceeing the event, speaking there. We'll have a lot of great folks that are reunioning together. And those that haven't been to one of the Red Pill Expos, it's one of the greatest events to, as it sounds, red pill you on various subjects and topics. It's not one thing. It's a lot about everything, and not afraid of engaging in debate and discussion.
Right.
And that's the spirit of G. Edward Griffin as well, which again, bookended in the new documentary film from The Great Awakening by Mickey Willison. he's getting a lot of heat and criticism from people on the left because they don't want to acknowledge that fundamental flaw in their belief system, even if they have, let's say, what they would determine to be a good reason. I really care about people. I love people. I want equality. And it's like a lot of times we're motivated by similar things, yet manifesting them, even if you're motivated them through tyranny, through centralized organization plans, that it belies your good intentions and corrupts them. And there's some naivete, perhaps a lack of willingness to look at history, or maybe there's a lot of ego there to say, well, it just hasn't been done the way I would do it, you
Mhm.
know. And so there's a lot of that still we struggle with as human beings.
It's interesting you said manifesting because I believe in big time in actual manifesting, and manifesting through prayer, I think is very, very powerful. What's interesting though is the cabal, which I call it, it's a generalization. I understand that. The cabal has figured out a long time ago that they manifest through us. They don't need to do manifesting on their own. What
Right.
they do is they predict a program us socially with fear, so we manifest what we're most afraid of. So they understand this stuff. They're very intellectual and they get all the processes. The difference is we the people generally don't want to take a shortcut. We want to work through it and get to where we need to get through because we earned it. The
Mm.
cabal takes shortcuts to everything. So they will manifest through we the people just through fear. They'll have you afraid, therefore you'll manifest exactly what you're most afraid about.
Exactly. Yeah. That is so important to relate and recognize. And we got to humble ourselves before God in this sense, because as
Yes, we
smart
do.
as we are or think we are, there's always somebody that's a little bit smarter and that
Mhm.
can fool us in just that one area where we get a little cocky and then we're back in the mix. And always come back to that movie with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves, The Devil's Advocate, where the journey, it's an R-rated movie, so it's not for kids, but if you get through it at the end, and I'm going to spoil it for you, basically, I mean, Keanu thinks he wins, and at the end, the devil reappears and
Mhm.
applies to his ego, if you will, or vanity, and how we're always vulnerable as we're in the human body. That's why, again, prayer and other things, the practice of the presence of the most holy in our lives through prayer, through contemplation, through meditation, whatever it is that works for you to connect with that, is important to be directed by that which is not manipulating you through fear, which would seem to me a very straightforward litmus. Does this elicit fear in me, or does this elicit empowerment and love, for instance, as a way to say, hey, I wonder if this is coming from more from God or coming from somebody's ego, vanity, or
Yeah, I think that's an excellent advice. And I think we also have to be open and to see what we are fallible, but that's good. That's what man is, right? We have to be able to set the ego on the shelf and look at it. I'll use a great example. The day of 9/11, I was watching the TV, as most people were, and I'm screaming at the TV. That's controlled demolition. I
Mhm.
know controlled demolition. I'm screaming at it. Here's where I have to be honest. After 3 days of watching the TV, I was all in on the narrative.
Mm. How much the programming worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
And I knew, and I was already studying things and conspiracies and so on and so forth. So I knew it going into it. And 3 days later, I'm like, planes hit the towers, towers fell. Let's go get them.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all vulnerable
It's
potentially.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's how powerful it is. So even if you know,
Yeah.
you have to, like you say, there's always somebody out there smarter than you. And whoever did that was a hell of a lot smarter than me because they got me.
Yeah, so then again, practicing the presence of the divine. Everybody's got, I realize, a different perspective on what that means. I just let you, follow that, because that is ultimately our protection. Whether you are a follower of Christ or whatever it is, bring that open-hearted love for creation and life itself and gratitude for that which gave you life. And it isn't government. That's not the source of your rights either. Even if we know that intellectually, though, if we don't practice it, then we fall prey to the next crisis, real or imagined, that we then abandon the freedom that we say we loved. And we see that example very, very close to us because we're still kind of simmering and experiencing the hurt and the pain and the loss from it. But how long will it be before we forget this? And then once again, they come out with another angle and we fall right back into the trap.
Hmm. Yeah, excellent. Well, it's a lot to think about, isn't
Yeah.
it? And the reality is when we have an understanding of self, I believe. And I went to a transition about 4 years ago where instead of me putting that square peg into the round hole, which I was really good at, I was good at forcing it in there. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I was a winner in my mind. Oh, I could win. I could do anything.
Mhm.
When I started just listening to that first voice in my head, and my heart, which is God speaking, in my opinion, it's amazing how everything just flowed easily after that.
Yes.
And suddenly it wasn't me anymore putting the square peg into the round hole. It's God who I listen to, and everything flowed sim. I'm like, wow, I'm a lot more effective when I just listen to that voice instead of reanalyze it and tell me why it's not the right one. Let me find the one I
Right.
want.
But the practice is like learning a language. And, if you speak English, American English, you grew up for the most part in this audience, and I know we got people from all over the world, learning it. It's like second nature to you because it's what you've learned. But imagine trying to learn the language of how does God speak to me? And that's again learning a new language. Or in the case of my body, learning the language of the symptoms that were not telling me I needed to go see a doctor to get an FDA approved drug. It
Mhm,
wasn't a drug deficiency. And yet that was what I was programmed to believe, and my parents were programmed to believe in the 20th century. That's the rise of, the cult of medicine, and it dominated things like never before.
mhm,
And so we're at a point where I, taught my children differently. And the gift that I could give to them, which is something I had to win very hard to learn the language, is to give them that language just like they learn English because they were born in America, that the language of their cells means something, and it doesn't mean that they're drug deficient, and they know, "Hey, man, I put the wrong thing in my body. I ate the thing my dad said it wasn't good for me, but he said, 'Go ahead and eat it so I'd learn.'" And what a gift that is, and I think God gave us that same gift to be here to
mhm,
learn, some would say the hard way, by making choices that we go, I don't like that choice anymore." Yet, if someone were to take away that choice, that agency, that freedom, that's a supreme, extraordinary violation, which
mhm,
I think the founding fathers of America knew. That's why they wanted to establish and maximize the freedom, even to screw up and to fail, that we would learn best and be stronger and greater and love liberty and love freedom all the more when we chose not to engage in it by our own choice, not by tyrannical, overlords.
yeah. Well, first, I love your term. We're not drug deficient, and that's brilliant. Um, I believe the best education you can get is through application,
Mm.
and
Put it to the test.
that means we can fail. And I think some of the best education we get is not through our successes, yet through our
Yeah.
failures. In fact, I've written a little bit when I've done seminars on something called fail forward, how it's more powerful to fail forward. And I give a mathematical analogy when it comes to this, and it kind of hits home for somebody. Sorry. First, I'd like to tell you, analysis breeds paralysis. I think most people have figured that one out, right? So or overanalyze something, we don't move forward. But I would prefer to fail, and you're going to have more successes in the long run. So if we use it mathematically, let's say you have the analyzer who will make one decision a day based in his job or whatever it is, and you're going to have the person that's more of a risk taker, but he's not afraid of failure. He'll make 5 decisions a day. Let's say that guy that makes 5 decisions a day, he's only successful 40% of the time. Let's say that the analyzer is successful 100% of the time, which would be surprising.
Mhm.
Still, who would be more effective? Well, the person that's making 5 decisions in a day and is effective 2 times is twice as effective as the guy that makes 1 decision. So, but guess what? The more he fails, suddenly his 40% success rate becomes 50, 60, and 80, where he becomes hyper successful in anything he does, where
Mhm.
the analyzer is still like, well, there's my one success a day. Boom, 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 boom. So we have to be able to fail forward. We have to be able to be okay with that, not be hurt,
Yeah.
just to understand, like, hey, that's good. That was a good lesson. Let's retweak that and move forward.
Well, and that's the lie of collectivism, Marxism, and communism is that we will prevent you from failing. We will care for your every
Right.
need. We will,
So true. It's a proven fact that it only takes $1,000 to feed a person for a year. That's $7 billion. So if they really cared, if they really, really cared, that problem could have been
That's
solved
a
decades
long time
ago.
ago, yeah. The war
Decades.
on poverty would have been solved if they wanted it, but most of the times you declare war on something, you get more of it, but that's by design. Again,
It is
that's the
by
maturation that, I ask people, and this upsets some when I say, the people that are foisting collectivism and Marxism and communism on us have a spiritual immaturity to not recognize how the world really works. If you want the best for people, freedom is the best option on making those things happen, not coercion, deception, and centralized planning. It seems obvious to many of us here, but to many out there that are still fighting for this collectivism, they need the hard lessons, I guess, of failing, hopefully forward. But that's part of the process of being on planet Earth at this time, a unique time in history, I say. And I think you're made for such a time as this. And Lewis, I'm just honored to connect with you finally. And anything I can do to help, I'd love to do more with screwbiggov.com. If we can do anything to help here at robertscottbell.com and connect anytime moving forward,
Absolutely.
please let me know.
Sure. And as you as well, I'd love to promote your August event, and if I can be there, I'd love to be there also.
That would be amazing. Yeah. And I'll connect you with, if you hadn't had G. Edward Griffin and interviewed him, what an amazing guy. He's opened up a lot of our minds and eyes and ears to history that we didn't know and weren't learning about. And he's been talking about it for what, 50, 60 years. So check out the Mickey Willis film, the Plandemic series, The Great Awakening, and you'll see G. Edward Griffin is really the instigator to that whole awakening, if you will, that we're talking about.
Yeah, a good friend of mine actually is really good friends with your friend Mickey Willis. In fact, she was at the premiere. So
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I couldn't be there. We had an event in Boise, Idaho, We the Patriots USA with Brian Festa and whole lot of awesome people. That was a great reunion. But that's the good thing about this. As much as like I want to be everywhere, used to be everywhere wasn't happening.
right,
And now any given weekend, there's a freedom event. There's an event like talking about the things we're talking about. What does that say about the success that's happening here despite all of the obstacles?
that's exactly right. Yeah, in fact, the app that we're creating is I'm going to promote virtually everybody's event. It's not up to me to. I'm not. I always tell people, excuse me, I'm not the arbiter of truth.
Mhm.
That's your job. I'll throw the information out there, and you guys figure it out.
All right. Lewis Herms, we got along, but I'd go hours with you and never run out of things to have fun talking about with you.
Sounds good too. It was fun. Thank you.
All right, Lewis Herms from Screw Big.